the first photo that I have, and it says National Parks celebrate 100th anniversary, and it says, sorry, this is all Congress would pay for, and it shows a park ranger that is handing, or has a cupcake and is giving it to all the animals, and then there's this other one, which just disappeared. Shoot. It's a picture of the fires in Yellowstone that happened quite recently, and that's how I'm going to start, by showing you that so that I can lead into what my introduction has. And it's, so imagine the beautiful lush forests of the Yellowstone Park, flattened by raging fires that left nothing but ash and soot and death in its wake. Imagine the massive amounts of homeless families unable to drink clean and pure drinking water, and that have to live off of the streams and ponds around them just to get water that is suitable. Imagine the uneducated youth that would never be able to see strong and durable moose that used to roam Yellowstone forest. How would one comprehend nature driving through a desolate concord of bare trees that have little color left in them, not even enough to even hint that they were once half a football field high? This is what could happen if the government keeps destroying the budgets of the Environmental Protection Agency and the national parks. The funding of our national parks is not sufficient to keep the parks maintained properly. When one goes to the national park, like Yellowstone, for example, one would expect to see a beautiful and well-maintained park full of well-kept campgrounds and recreational areas. There is no doubt that the feeling associated with the national parks is the wind through one's hair as a visitor looks around into the beautiful lush forestry and may hear the amazing call of an elk or the howling of a wolf. The national parks has been around since August 25th, 1916, when President Woodrow Wilson created the National Park Service. This was a, quote, new federal bureau in the Department of the Interior, responsible for protecting 35 national parks and monuments, then managed by the department and those yet to be established, end quote. When one is looking at the National Park Services, or how the National Park Services are being funded and protected, they should know that the government has created a federal bureau that declares and protects the national parks. So, according to the advocacy group Save EPA, an alliance of retired and otherwise former EPA professionals, the cuts to budgeting would end or decimate funding in all environmental programs that the EPA is responsible for keeping in balance. The fact that the federal government is or may be cutting the funding for the National Parks Association is startling, because according to the National Parks Conservation Association, there has been more than 7% or $137 million reduction in the account to operate national parks, and more than 12% or $364 million reduction in the total budget of the national parks over the last 5 years in total dollars. Even more surprising is the national parks cost is very little. The entire budget of the National Park Service is a tiny 1/15 of 1% of the federal budget, and the average American household pays as much for the national parks each year as it would cost to pay for a cup of coffee each day. Cuts on spending in the Department of the Environmental Protection Agency will determine the EPA's jobs. As the president of the Federation of Government Employees EFGE Council number 236, which is the number for who he represents, John O'Grady said, the effects will be enormous, not just in terms of people's jobs, but in terms of the loss of the important work that they're doing. In addition, Trump's budget would slash the Environmental Protection Agency's budget by 31%, eliminating thousands of jobs from that agency. These cuts on spending in the area of staff will destroy the ability to protect the environment. This is going to have extreme impact on the EPA's ability to protect human health and environment, says John O'Grady as well. Therefore, cutting this budget fails to recognize the program's success as one of America's most effective conservation tools, protecting national parks and other parklands important to Americans. America has been taking the National Parks Service's funding away steadily over the past 10 years, and they have become in developed backlog because of how little the government is funding them. This will cause the efficiency to become crippled, leaving them unable to develop and protect the land and drinking water of the U.S., and make it hard for their parks to be kept maintained due to the extreme spending on on the exhausting of fires, or extinguishing of fires, and the lack of the ability to study what can prevent them. The government should spend more on the EPA and not on military weaponry. Instead of focusing on spending money on weapons built to destroy nature, the government should be focusing on raising the budget of the EPA. This will enable the EPA to focus less on keeping staff and would provide them with the resources to prevent forest fires and other natural disasters from damaging or polluting the water for humankind. So in order to appreciate people who live on the earth, we must respect and take care of the lands we stand on.